If I told you that, on a winter night in the Middle Ages, the fate of an entire family did not lie in the hands of war, plague, or famine, but in a cow shivering from the cold, would you believe it? Not because that farmer was overflowing with compassion, not because they cherished the animal like a pet, but because if the cow died before dawn, spring the following year would never come for them. That night, the wind screamed across the empty fields. Snow lay thick, swallowing every sound. The small thatched house sank into silence, the kind of silence that appears only when the cold has seeped deep into every grain of wood. Then a man woke up, not because of a nightmare, not because of wolves, but because of an unnatural silence coming from the livestock shed. The cow did not bellow, did not move. Its breathing grew weaker in the darkness. The farmer immediately understood what that meant. This was not just an animal about to freeze to death. This was milk for a child still nursing. It was draft power for the spring fields. It was manure for the single harvest that would feed the entire household. Lose it, and they would not just lose property, they would lose the future. But saving the cow in the depths of winter also meant bringing danger into the very last refuge of the family. Fire, smoke, toxic gases, confined space. One wrong decision could take more lives than it saved. And that was the moment the medieval farmer had to choose. Let the cow die, or gamble everything to save tomorrow. To understand why a single cow could push an entire family into such a life or death choice, we have to return to winter in the Middle Ages. Not the winter of romantic memory, but a slow, stubborn enemy that never showed mercy. The cold did not arrive in violent storms. It came one night at a time, through moisture seeping into wall cracks, through layers of wind cutting through thin, thatched roofs. It did not kill quickly. It wore you down. The medieval farmer's house, whether in England or Northern Europe, was not a fortress against the cold. There was no glass, no insulation, no enclosed fireplace, only an open hearth in the center of the home, smoke crawling up to the ceiling before escaping through a small hole in the roof. When night fell, the temperature inside was only slightly higher than outside, enough not to die immediately, but not enough to be safe. In that world, a cow was not livestock. It was the foundation of life. A healthy cow meant daily milk, butter, and cheese to carry children through winter, and pulling power to plow the fields once the ice thawed. Cow dung was the only thing that could restore exhausted soil. A farmer could endure hunger for a few days, but they could not lose the cow and still hope to survive into the next year. The cowshed, contrary to modern assumptions, was not warm at all. It was usually a low space with damp earthen floors, thickly spread straw that easily absorbed moisture. When temperatures dropped sharply at night, that moisture froze. The straw became cold and heavy. A cow that stood still for too long began to lose heat through its legs and belly, the areas in direct contact with the ground. Its large body was no longer an advantage. It became a burden. During the day, people could force the cow to move, feed it more, check on it constantly. But at night, everything changed. When the entire village sank into sleep, the cold reached its peak. This was when many animals collapsed without anyone noticing in time, and for that very reason, a farmer waking in the middle of the night was nothing unusual. It was a survival reflex. When the shed door opened, the cold struck straight into his face. The weak firelight from the house could not reach inside. The cow stood there, head lowered, its back coated with a thin layer of frost. Its breathing was heavy, unnaturally slow. The skin was so cold it no longer felt alive. The farmer did not need medical knowledge, he only needed experience. And experience told him one thing very clearly. If he left it here for a few more hours, it would not survive. But this is the most brutal part of winter. There are no good choices, only less bad ones. Bringing the cow into the house meant breaking the fragile boundary between safety and chaos. The living space was already cramped. There were small children, there were elderly people. Adding a body weighing hundreds of kilos, breathing out moisture and a pungent stench, would increase the risk of smoke suffocation when the fire had to be burned hotter. If they did not save it, they would lose the future. If they did, they would gamble the present. This is not a story about kindness. It is a cold survival equation that every farmer had to face, whether they wanted to or not. That night, standing before the shed door, the man understood that his decision would echo not only into the next morning, but into the entire season to come. And when he placed his hand on the cow's stiff, freezing body, he knew one thing for certain. Time was not on their side. The decision was made in silence. There was no oath, no time for hesitation. The farmer knew that with every passing minute, the cow's body lost more heat, and at the same time, the cold was already waiting to surge into the house the moment the door opened. The first climax did not come from fire or smoke, but from the sheer weight of life itself. The cow weighed hundreds of kilos, its legs slipping on the frozen ground, its reflexes dulled by the cold. Every dragging step was a struggle between man and earth, between will and strength already drained after a long day. One slip, one hard impact, and not only the cow, but the one trying to save it could collapse into the darkness of the night. When the house door opened, the second climax appeared instantly. Cold air poured in like a living creature, devouring the fragile warmth accumulated through the night. The space, already cramped, was now invaded by a large, damp, foul-smelling body. Children stirred awake. An elderly person coughed softly. The cow breathed heavily, each exhale releasing moisture that made the air thicker, heavier. The house was no longer a quiet refuge. It became a survival chamber, where every mistake was magnified. The farmer had to build the fire higher. The third climax arrived immediately. Stronger fire meant thicker smoke. There was no chimney, no ventilation fan, only a small hole in the roof. Smoke began to accumulate, slowly but relentlessly. Eyes burned, throats stung. No one in the house named the invisible gas that was forming, but their bodies felt it. They knew that if the fire burned too fiercely, the price could be the entire family slipping into a sleep from which they would never wake. To maintain balance, they were forced to sacrifice the most precious thing they had, their own comfort. The fourth climax erupted when blankets, coats, and layers of dry straw were wrapped around the cow's body. The adults stepped farther away from the fire. The children were pushed into the colder corner. No one complained. No one asked why. In a medieval winter night, everyone understood the rules of the game. The cow had to warm up first because it was the only bridge to spring. But the climax did not end there. The fifth climax came from time itself. No one knew whether the cow's body was strong enough to recover. No one knew whether this borrowed warmth would arrive in time. Every passing minute was a trial. The cow's breathing slowed, then grew stronger again. The entire household listened to each breath as if counting the seconds of their own lives. There was no clock, only the crackling of the fire, the wind howling outside, and a question hanging in the air that no one dared to speak. If dawn came and the cow still could not stand, would all of these sacrifices become meaningless? That night, no one slept, not because of the cold, but because of waiting. Waiting for a sign, a movement, proof that they had chosen correctly. And in that tense stretch of time, the farmer came to understand a bitter truth. Survival is not about avoiding danger, but about choosing which danger you can live with. If you were standing in that house, surrounded by fire, smoke, and cold, would you have done anything differently? Would you choose to protect the cow or protect the fragile safety of the family that night? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the answers we give today reflect very clearly what people were forced to face hundreds of years ago. As the night slowly drifted toward the edge of dawn, something seemingly paradoxical began to reveal itself. The cow, the burden that had brought smoke, stench, and fear into the house, became the very element that stabilized the survival space. Its steadier breathing slowed the rhythm of the entire household. Heat from its massive body spread outward, not as intense as fire, but persistent and silent. In that world, warmth did not come from a single source. It was accumulated from fire, from straw, from coats, and from a living being still holding on. The twist lies here. Saving the cow was not an impulsive act, nor was it an act of softness. It was a cold calculation by people who understood their survival system intimately. They knew fire could kill if pushed too far, smoke could bring collapse if allowed to build, and cold could strip everything away if underestimated. They also knew that a healthy cow was a continuous source of biological energy. Heat, milk, pulling power, things that could not be replaced by any inanimate object inside that thatched house. The response came as the first pale light slipped through the gap in the roof. The cow moved. Not much, but enough to confirm one thing. Its body had passed the point of no return. The family did not celebrate. No one jumped up in joy. There was only a quiet feeling spreading through the space, the feeling of a correct choice. The night before, they had accepted living with risk in order to preserve a fragile future. And it was that acceptance that made the difference between endurance and collapse. From a modern perspective, bringing livestock into the house might be considered wrong. But in that context, it was a survival technique. A closed system in which people, animals, fire, and materials worked together against a common enemy. There were no heroes, no resounding victory, only a morning that arrived on time and a spring that still held hope. When the sun finally rose above the snow-covered horizon, that faint light did not carry victory, nor did it bring complete relief. It confirmed only one simple fact. They had survived one more day. The cow stood more steadily, its breathing even and warm. The family was exhausted, eyes red from smoke and lack of sleep. But the house was still intact. The future, fragile as it was, had not yet been taken away. In the world of the medieval farmer, that was already a good outcome. This story is not meant to praise hardship, nor to romanticize the past. It exists to remind us that survival is never a perfect choice. It is the art of intelligent trade-offs under constraint. That farmer did not defeat the cold. He only delayed it long enough for spring to have a chance to return. And in that delay, he used everything available: people, animals, fire, straw, space, to form a fragile but effective survival system. We, who live in warm houses where a switch brings heat, hot water flows on demand, and insurance exists for every risk, easily forget that most of human history was written in nights like this. Nights no one witnessed, with no records, no monuments, only quiet decisions made to protect tomorrow. The cow was not saved merely to survive that single night. It was saved so the fields could be plowed, so milk could be drawn, so an entire chain of survival would not be broken. The lesson lies here. Endurance does not come from ideal conditions, but from the ability to adapt. Medieval people did not have our technology, but they possessed a deep understanding of the physical world around them. They knew what generated heat, what retained it, and what was worth protecting at any cost. On that winter night, they chose the future over temporary safety. If you place yourself in that position, between fire, smoke, and cold, what decision would you make? Would you accept risk to save a living being capable of sustaining an entire family? Or would you choose short-term safety? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to continue exploring stories of how people survived in the past, subscribe to the channel and join us as we dig deeper into the lesser-told chapters of history, where life was fought for one night at a time.